Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. A pleasure to connect with you guys on a show that's interactive and dynamic, where you, the viewer and listener, can offer your perspective on the show by leaving comments across social media, and those comments will shape the content of what we deliver each day on this program. That's literally what's going to happen today. First, let me get some business out of the way first. The show is presented by Skooma Boutique Dispensary. The best of the best, the creme de la creme, is Skooma Boutique Dispensary, with the location on the downtown mall and a location on Elliewood Avenue. Skooma Boutique Dispensary. We also thank the Clifton for being a presenting partner of today's program. They're launching a Thursday music series that starts on September 1st, the Clifton in Keswick. And on September 1st, Thursday, Marie and Coda of Chamomile and Whiskey will be in attendance. And I'm going to be there. It's going to be an absolutely dynamite Thursday series. So today's talk show is going to be centered and focused upon the challenges facing public schools today. And I put together a tweet yesterday. Carol Thorpe, hello. I put together a tweet yesterday, and then I proceeded to syndicate the tweet. So I originate a lot of our ideas for the show on Twitter. My personal Twitter account is Jerry Miller Now. I encourage you to follow me there. That's where a lot of the content starts. I'll post a tweet in the Twitter sphere, then I'll take a screenshot of it and then syndicate it across the I Love CVille Network, which is Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn and Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, every social media platform. And immediately the response was noticeable and impactful. The topic, challenges facing public schools today. I outlined a few. Bus driver shortages, teacher shortages, student enrollment dropping, funding from the Commonwealth is down, the private school voucher program, the technology in public schools is behind the private school peers. Public schools have become political battlefields. I've said it once, I'll say it again. Glenn Youngkin won the race for governor of Virginia because Terry McAuliffe lost the battle, the political battle, when it came to schools. He stuck his foot in his mouth 3 times when he said parents should not have any say with their children's education. That was a boneheaded mistake. You got critical race theory, you got gender-neutral bathrooms, you got transgender, a topic more than ever in public schools. You got throttling or limiting or holding back what students are reading based on political agendas. I mean, you got landmines everywhere. It is a battlefield. So I asked this question, and viewers and listeners immediately responded. Paul McCarter had some great comments. Heather Lamont Walker had some great comments. John Blair had some great comments. We heard from parents like Kelly Jackson. We heard from teachers like Nikki Hernandez in the comment section. And I'm going to relay some of these comments live on air. First, I'd like to go to LinkedIn, where a friend of the program, John Blair, routinely interacts with the show and offers provocative commentary and comments, ideas that genuinely get me thinking. John, I sincerely mean that, dude. John is on a short list of people who create or help shape or influence this show. Carol's on that short list. Scott Aaronworth's on that short list. Kevin Higgins, Kevin Yancey, Philip, the King of Scottsville, and I'm going to leave people out. And if I have not mentioned you, I apologize. But John's on that short list. He left 2 comments that I want to relay to you from LinkedIn. Here's the first comment. He says this: Jerry, I don't mean to be dismissive to any other concern, but the teacher shortage is the most challenging aspect for Charlottesville and other school divisions. Teachers are the straw that stirs the drink when it comes to education. While it will never happen as educational resources become more scarce across the nation, it might be a good idea for the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County to look at areas of cooperation, consolidation in terms of education. It's a great point. He takes it a step further, John. John, fantastic comments from you, dude. He takes it a step further and says this. Listen to this. This is fantastic. He says, Jerry, one more granular thought. Albemarle County literally has a middle school located within the city of Charlottesville, Burley. Was there any exploration of collaboration between the city and the county on transportation issues relating to the buses that serve Burley? Here's what he's alluding to. We have a bus driver shortage in the city with city schools and at the county with county public schools. Could they have utilized Burley, the middle school, as a proof of performance to show a consolidated track record for transportation, for optimization and efficiency purposes? Basically what that means, could they have utilized this school as a proof of performance of what two school systems working in conjunction could do for efficiency and optimization? It's a damn good point. It's a damn good point. Here's a question I have to ask you, and we're going to weave Judah Wickhauer in the mix here. I'm going to ask this question of parents watching this program. There is no question, there's no question right now that the gap between private and public schools, and we're just going to utilize the Central Virginia area because that's where we're based in, but this can be scaled or escalated across the country in most markets. There's no doubt that the gap between the private school and the public school is wider than it's been in a long time, if not ever. We are still dealing with the ramifications of COVID and the pandemic. The COVID pandemic, this 2 years of crap, has thrown the used car market and it's turned it upside down where we can't buy them. Now that's cooling off. But it dramatically impacts used cars. It dramatically impacts commodities. It dramatically impacts housing. It dramatically impacts small businesses that were forced to close during the pandemic while the Targets and the Lowe's and the Costco's were prioritized and they stayed open. Okay? It dramatically impacts fuel. It dramatically impacts so many aspects of our life, including education. Including education. So we're still like deciphering or like navigating or like swimming through this collateral damage. What COVID has done to the world, to the country, to the Commonwealth, to Central Virginia, to Charlottesville. We're still figuring it out. One thing we know is education is in this like period of purgatory, public school education. And public school education in this purgatory period is pursuing, hey, do we get the promotion to the pearly gates? Do we get the promotion to heaven? Or do we get demoted even further and risk sliding down the scale and hanging out with Lucifer? It's searching for an identity. It's searching for its like what it's going to become. Public schools right now, post-pandemic, are like this like pre-teenager that's going through puberty, that's got a couple of patches of hair on his face, one around his cheek, his chin, but the beard hasn't fully grown in. The voice is cracking, the gangly legs and arms are present, and we're all waiting to see what this preteen matures into. What kind of man does this preteen become? That's where we're at right now. So I ask you, the viewer and listener, what are the top challenges facing public school education and public schools across the Commonwealth, across Central Virginia? And I outlined and I bullet pointed a few. I highlighted bus driver shortages, and I mentioned 7 of 40 city Charlottesville public school buses are going to be active when the kids return to school in a few days. 7 of 40 bus driver shortage. Parents are pissed. Their kids are walking to school further than ever in some areas that are not easy to navigate for children. I highlighted teacher shortages, student enrollment dropping, funding from the Commonwealth is down, the private school voucher program potentially pulling public school students more than ever to private schools. I highlighted the technology being behind in public schools, and I highlighted the political battlefield that public schools have become, specifically Youngkin beating McAuliffe because of that political battlefield in public schools. Now, I want to weave Judah Wickower into the mix. Let's go to the two-shot and welcome the jack of all wit. Judah B. Wickower, A+ people, reasonable guy, common sense guy. I'm going to start by saying this. Yesterday's show was hot. The follow-up from yesterday's show was even hotter. The feedback from the community has been substantial. You've had ample time to read some of the commentary. As someone who is reasonable, which comments jumped out to you first?
I mean, obviously the ones at the top. but I'm joking, Jerry. Calm down. But specifically,
I don't think people got that joke. But go ahead.
I'm a little curious about Maddie's. He on the Instagram thread, he talks about segregation, and I'm sure he may have some good points, but all right, so
I'll read his comment verbatim.
Yeah, I don't know how true that is today.
This is from Matt Daring. He's come on this show before. Matt Daring. He goes by the handle Matty the Gardener on Instagram. This comment I did not agree with, but some folks did. Matt Daring said private school vouchers are the #1 threat or challenge to public schools right now. Then he says private schools are just racial segregation. That's what Matt Daring says. He says, note how private school enrollment soared after Brown versus Board of Education. That's not a coincidence, he says. Vouchers are just the latest scheme to deplete public schools, he says. Then he adds a few other comments. He says, the private school voucher program is refunding wealthy folks so they don't have to pay for private schools and fund public schools. He says that's the goal. He also highlights private schools existed before desegregation, but they absolutely took off after Brown versus Board of Education. That's not correlation, that's causation. You can look to the rhetoric of those that have lobbied hardest to get private school vouchers, and it will show you the racism behind them. It's uncomfortable, it's difficult, but it's true. You want to touch on that?
Yeah, I mean, he may have some good points, but I think in his in saying that private schools are just racial segregation, I completely disagree.
That's what I said. And then I had a hard time reading beyond that, but I continue to read.
Yeah,
I do want to highlight it, though, because
it does have some interesting points.
It does have some interesting points. What struck you?
I mean,
we'll cut to the chase. Let's cut to the chase here. Private schools in Central Virginia, okay? I'll be very straightforward here. When you're looking at the demographic profile of private schools in Central Virginia, you see homogenous student bodies.
Okay.
You see wealthy and white student bodies for the most part. They would not be the most diverse or eclectic student bodies from a race standpoint. Anyone want to disagree with that? I don't think anyone can.
I don't know enough about
I don't think anyone can disagree with that. Who's going to disagree with the comment I just made? Nobody. Okay? They're not diverse landscapes of learning. You see a lot of white kids, a lot of wealthy ones. I'm going to counter that by saying this. What is Charlottesville-Albemarle County?
What is Charlottesville and Albemarle County?
Are the demographics you're seeing with these private schools synonymous with the demographics you're seeing in the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County?
Do they match up?
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I would have to see the numbers.
The likelihood of diversity in the private schools when the customer base is from Charlottesville and Albemarle County, it's difficult to get diversity because Charlottesville and Albemarle County as jurisdictions are not diverse to begin with.
Okay.
Matt makes the point that the voucher program is evangelized
by white people for white people, apparently.
Evangelized and lobbied by white people for white people to get more kids in private school. Paul McCarter has made some good points on this on another page. The I Love CVille group. I very much encourage you to read the interaction on the I Love CVille group. Paul MacArthur and Heather Lamont Walker offer some phenomenal perspective.
Yeah.
Here's Paul MacArthur, and he offers phenomenal perspective. Someone tag Paul MacArthur. Someone get Paul MacArthur in the mix. Paul MacArthur, you out there? Let's get him in the mix. I'm tagging him right now. We're chatting you up. Right now. Period. Enter. Publish. He says this, and he's got some common sense. Paul does. Paul says, why does this go on? Publish. I like when people say the voucher program or private school enrollment is an issue, then complain about teacher and bus driver shortages. Those people taking their kids out of public schools are still paying taxes to support the schools, but removing some of the burden from the system. That is a good point. You want to assess that one at all?
I had a hard time parsing that sentence, but yeah, it sounds...
I can parse it if you want me to.
No, it sounds fair to me. He's talking about... I believe he's talking about the fact that complaining about the voucher program taking students out of public schools is a problem, when in reality he's saying that what's happening is parents are taking their kids out of public schools, which means that there is less burden on the public schools because you're not, instead of 40 kids in a class, you've got now 39. And what's more, the parents, while they're paying for private school by taking their kid out, their taxes are still helping the public school.
There you go. Can the private school voucher program actually help the public school by diminishing the student body the public school is responsible for? The public school, while it gets funding from the Commonwealth based on enrollment, it also gets funding from the local jurisdiction. And to put it in perspective, retired teacher Heather Lamont Walker says this: for Charlottesville public schools, the Commonwealth provides $5,400 per student. The city of Charlottesville spends $12,044 per student. So when someone takes a city kid out of city public schools and put them in private schools, yes, they lose $5,400 from the Commonwealth on enrollment, but they still get $12,044 from the city and taxpayer dollars.
No, it's saying that they spend that much less on a student that's no longer there. So while they don't get the $5,400,
they get $7,000.
No longer spending $7,000.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. You're exactly right. Thank you for clarifying that. So you see her point. So I'm going to ask this question as an overarching thesis or a sub-thesis. The overarching theme or motif of the show: what are the challenges facing public schools today? A sub-theme or a sub-thesis is this: can the private school voucher program actually help public schools? Because it diminishes the student body in the public schools, which makes the public school easier to run.
Yeah. I mean, I would tend to agree, but I don't know enough about them. I mean, Matt makes the point, or tries to make the point, that that they help white people. I'm wondering, is there some way that vouchers are not making their way to anyone but white people?
Danny O'Day, I'm looking at Charlottesville City demographics, and I'll post the link right now, and it says Charlottesville City demographics is 70% white. 70% white. I'm literally going to post this and send this to you now. And please, there's no chance that you can argue that Albemarle County is diverse in any way, Danny. I mean, let's be realistic here. Let's be realistic here. I'm literally replying to your link right now. Danny, please read this. : publish. Send link. No one would describe these areas as diverse. Would you?
It depends on where you come from. I mean, I lived in Maine for 12 years, and Maine was a lot less diverse than Charlottesville.
You're comparing the city of Charlottesville to a place basically in Canada.
That's my point.
Okay,
What is your definition?
The question is this.
What's your definition of diverse? Do we need 50 to 50% of whatever else? I mean,
Who watching the program, anyone watching this program call the city of Charlottesville diverse? Would anyone call it diverse and racial demographic? Anybody?
I mean, I see the full spectrum of people walking around Charlottesville, but I've never gone and done I
just posted the link. I literally posted the link that it's 70% white.
Okay.
I would not call that diverse. Would you?
I mean, can you give a contrast?
Dude, 7 out of 10 people are white. Is that diverse? It's just the eye test. It's just the eye test. You're overthinking this. If 7 out of 10 people in a community are white, is that diverse? It's just common sense answer question.
I need more information.
Oh my God,
Sure.
you're overthinking this. This is paralysis of analysis.
No.
7 out of 10 people in a room are white. Is that diverse? What am I missing here?
Okay, no, fine. You want to hear me say no?
No, I mean, isn't that just common sense?
No, it's not. What are the statistics statewide? What are statistics countrywide? I need more information. I'm sorry, that's me. If you don't know that
America, can someone give me the America population of America from a diversity standpoint? I guarantee you it's not 70% in America.
Okay.
A lot of topics to uncover or to dissect or to unpack on today's show. Scott Aaronworth says the only thing diverse about Charlottesville is the food scene. Exactly. Well said, Esquire Scott Aaronworth. What else is diverse about Charlottesville? You got a university that's predominantly white. You got a town and a county that surrounds the town that's predominantly white. And you got sectors of businesses that are emerging that are STEM and technology that predominantly attract white males. That's what's happening right here. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Okay. No, I'm just, I looked it up. This says in 2020, as of 2020, white Americans, the racial and ethnic majority, representing close to 58% of the population.
Okay, so America's 58% for white. That's what you're saying.
So, yeah, there's a 12%
That's
difference.
substantial.
Okay.
That is substantial. A 12% delta from America to Charlottesville. You're saying 58% from what you're reading here. Can anyone else confirm this? We want fact checkers. 58% of America is white.
Apparently.
City of Charlottesville is 70%. I would say that is not diverse. And Albemarle County is worse from a diversity standpoint. So I'm asking multiple questions here. Private schools in the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County are predominantly white with their student body. But I just explained that the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County are predominantly white from a demographic standpoint. How will there be diversity in the private schools if the feeders, the city and the county, don't have diversity to begin with? First question for you. Second question I have for you. Will the private school voucher program potentially help public schools by alleviating overpopulation issues? Taking students from one school system, public, and putting them in another, private. Making the jobs for teachers potentially easier. Take it a step further. Take it a step further. If the private school voucher program does alleviate the student body crunch, will the student body that is left with public school be a demographic that is on a socioeconomic ladder, not the wealthiest, perhaps living on the financial margin? Because the voucher is not going to cover the full nut of private school tuition. So the family's still going to have to take money out of pocket, and not every family has the disposable income to do that. So, will the voucher program, yes, it could alleviate student body overpopulation crunch, but does it leave a student body of poor to lower middle class kids?
It's a fair question.
Fair question.
I actually, to to slightly change the subject. I actually prefer Paul McCarter makes some great
points. Paul does
about I think how schools should be changing, or even maybe get rid of schools and just start over.
Well, you have referenced that on the show before. Paul McCarter makes this comment. He says, "Why on earth are we spending $14,000 per student in the city of Charlottesville when private schools are able to educate? Some will argue at a better quality for so much less. Anytime this question comes up, people think it's an attack on teachers. I definitely don't think the budget is crazy because the money spent on teachers." Heather responds to that comment and offers tremendous clarity. She says, "Paul, because every student is entitled to a free education. Students that require one-on-one daily aids, students that require multiple specialists, students that need to enroll in a special needs school, one student can actually cost the system over 50 G's.
Yeah.
While some, multiple students, may only cost $4,000 or less."
She's basically saying that the 12,000 or whatever it is an average, because some kids may require multiple teachers, multiple classrooms.
Special needs kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Other kids are pretty much just coasting through, doing their own thing, doing their homework, taking their tests, and they don't require a lot of work. And yeah, that's a great point. Not every student is. It's not like every student requires this exact amount of money.
I mean,
but I still like Paul McCarter's idea of
new school.
Yeah, just because not all students are. So first of all, I want to say that that choice and just, I mean, it's the same thing with businesses. You don't want everything to be Amazon. You want choice. You want to be able to get something somewhere else. You don't want there to be only one restaurant in town where you get their burger and their fries and that's it. Anytime you want to go out to eat. We have an amazing amount of choice, and I think schools are helped by having some choice because they can't just coast and do the bare minimum. And I think he makes some great points in how schools could change, where teachers, and I think we talked about this somewhat during the pandemic, and like what is school going to become in the future? What if this happens again? And we looked at some of the things like one teacher getting paid by individual families to bring kids together and teach them. And he makes this point here where one teacher can be paid more taking on a group of, say, he says 12 kids.
We talked about this during the pandemic. Teachers bucking the system and becoming educational entrepreneurs. A teacher going to families and saying, "You guys pool your resources, employ me directly. I will teach your kids in a 1 to 10 setting, one teacher for 10 kids, as opposed to the 1 to 35 kids your son or daughter currently are in a classroom. And that 1 to 10 setting will offer your son or daughter a better education, and I'll do it at a price point that's lower than private school."
Yeah. And which leaves you money to spend on other areas. For instance, if he makes the point, if you want to teach your kid Japanese,
or if you want your kid to take tennis lessons,
that they wouldn't be able to learn in the school, but here, rather than your tax and your personal money going to pay for whatever that is, $12,000 per student, you could pay $8,000 and have money left over to do a part-time like language study for your kid.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of this is why some parents have chosen homeschooling, because there's not that generic, my kid is going to school to learn all these generic things. It's, I can finely tune and focus this based on what my child is good at, what my child needs to needs help with, where is my child going. He makes a point where, who needs a football stadium, if nobody in the school wants to play football? Who needs a mediocre STEM lab if all the students are jocks?
Yeah, it's a very good point. Read the I Love CVille group comment thread, and you will certainly have topics of conversation that will get you thinking like it's gotten us thinking. I'm going to throw this question out to the viewers and listeners. Your kid's having a hard time getting to school because in the city of Charlottesville, there's 7 of 40 buses active. Your kid's having a hard time getting home from school for the same reason. When your kid gets to school, he's in an overcrowded classroom because there's not enough teachers to teach him. When your kid gets to school, he may see a new principal and new administrators in the school system because the turnover is substantial. Are we creating a public school system, or maybe it's organically been created, that is pushing literally kids out the door to private schools into other opportunities? Because as Kelly Jackson put in the thread, it's like this chicken and an egg scenario, she says. If the kids can't get to school, how are they going to learn? Seriously. How are they going to learn? This topic has so many layers to the onion.
Yeah, and here's another one. I've been to public and private schools myself. In Los Angeles, I went to a private school before switching to a public school for my last 2 years there. Then we moved to Maine, and I went for 3 years to a private school before switching to the public school. They all have their problems. They all have things that they're good at. I loved the private school in Maine, but there were 10 kids in my grade. That was my entire class. So when I was doing well in math and I started moving ahead in the book, what was there for me? My teacher, could give me a little bit of help, but it was just like me going ahead in class. So
what's the alternative, though?
So that was the part of the reason why I switched to the public school, because the public school had 3 or 4 different versions.
Okay, so they had levels of math that you could take.
Yeah.
Where the private school, because of strapped resources, did not.
Yeah, they had remedial math. They had normal math, and then they had college AP prep, whatever it's called. So there were various classrooms where different people could find their level. Now the public school had problems of its own, and the private school had other problems that we don't need to get into. But the point is, none of them are perfect, and having more choice gives the ability for people to find what works for them.
Well said. Good job. Very, 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 very well said. Marquise Johnson, watching the program. He knows what's up. Are you in the city right now? Are you in Charlottesville or are you in Hampton? Marquise, let us know. He says Stab white, Covenant white, Tandem white, Blue Ridge School white, Virginia Episcopal School white. He went to school, I believe, in this area. Is that right, Mr. Johnson? Travis and Danville. Jerry, that's a tough one. After Brown versus Board, private schools popped up, but in that same mold, many of the current old school buildings in the state were built immediately after as well. Districts were realigned and minority students were left with the old buildings, and the new public schools were in the newly drawn districts. Now, after white flight, a lot of former all-white communities where these schools were built became heavily minority populated and poor white kids. Travis Hackworth, Danville, leaving that comment. I am very curious to see how the gap is potentially closed this year and whether it does get closed with public and private. Because if something doesn't happen quickly and enrollment continues to diminish, you got to be really concerned for your public school counterparts. Georgia Gilmer leaves this comment. Today they are dumbing down the classes and getting away from AP classes. Kevin Yancey leaves this comment. When public education becomes politicized, only the students suffer. To say a postdoctoral theory course is being forced on elementary education when 90% bitching about it can't even give a basic definition of what it is. I don't think we need the public schools with as much pomp and circumstance and bells and whistles, which is Paul's point. He said, and I'm paraphrasing part of it, not every school needs a massive football stadium.
Right.
If you want to play football, maybe you're going to a certain school to play football.
Yeah.
He makes the point, not every school needs a mediocre STEM lab. Mm-hmm. Why not pull the resources
Right.
and do a super deluxe STEM lab?
Right. Why not create schools that cater towards jocks so that they can learn and do what they want to do? And why not create schools that cater towards, the science set, who want to focus on mathematics and don't need money for that school being wasted on a sports stadium.
I still think the biggest issue facing public schools is teacher pay. And I know you guys, maybe you disagree.
No, I don't disagree.
Okay. I am not opposed to evolving and innovating the schools. I'm not opposed to gender-neutral bathrooms. But why wouldn't we prioritize funding first for teachers before all these other amenities? Mm-hmm. As John Blair said, it's the straw that stirs the drink. The teachers. Give them more. Get more talent in the classrooms. Get more teachers in the classrooms so classroom sizes drop in size. And watch as parents stay stickier or keep their kids in the schools longer. That seems like common sense to me. Doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. That money does have to come from somewhere.
Lisa Costello says this. Lisa Costello, we like when you comment on the show. Some view public schools as a monopoly. As pointed out, everyone is forced to support the public schools through taxes, even if they are paying out of pocket for private schools or homeschooling.
Yeah, that is a good point. I mean, the government rarely does anything well or cheaply.
So why, maybe we'll take her point a step further. Why do they need to innovate when they get the money regardless?
Yeah.
Why do they need to change, improve, or make things better when the money's going to come no matter what?
Yeah.
I mean, it's messed up. You got two educational avenues, one rooted in a foundation of innovation, perhaps because they have the money to innovate and improve, private schools. And
they also have a bottom line.
Great point. They got to make a profit.
Yeah.
Great point.
I mean,
bravo.
That's a great driver of
making money,
innovation, and continuing
bravo.
to make money.
Damn good. I should have led with that point. Said it better than I would have. They have to get better.
Yeah, or at least stay competitive.
Have to, or stay competitive. Where the public school, no matter what, is going to get your tax dollar.
And it's going to get students.
Exactly.
And a lot of them have no choice. And I don't know how the vouchers work. But yeah, if somebody's getting a voucher and it doesn't cover everything, they've got to pull some out of pocket. Some people don't have that. So yeah, some people are just going to be stuck at public schools.
So there's your predicament.
They certainly don't want, they certainly don't want to lose too many. But some people have made the point that it's actually a cost saver if they cull some of them from the herd, from their roles.
Culling the herd.
I don't know if I'd call it culling the herd.
Why not?
They may be losing some of the best and bright, not necessarily best. They may be losing some good students, but if overall there's a balance, and if they lose enough so that it takes some pressure off, while not losing so many that they're completely underfunded, that's
slippery slope.
Yeah,
super slippery slope. And you see why this topic is so dynamic.
Yeah.
You see why this topic is so dynamic. How about this question for you?
There are no pat answers.
Exactly. All this topic is nothing but gray area. This topic is nothing but if this happens, there's negative calls because of it. To ask you this question, the voucher program, should the voucher program, or could the voucher program be tailored in a way where partial payments are not accepted?
Explain that.
You get, let's just say, a voucher for $16K. Your valued, your public school education, just back of the napkin estimate, is $16,000 for school, public school.
Okay.
You get a $16,000 voucher, but the private schools start at, for the sake of math, we'll say 20. We know they're much higher. Some say that voucher cannot be used because there's a $4,000 difference. It can only be used for the full amount.
So you're saying vouchers would be invalidated unless they covered the entire amount for a private school?
Because that's the way from keeping only the rich to use not the rich, because the rich aren't using the vouchers, they're paying for the private school in totality. But that's the way to keep public schools from becoming schools of lower income.
The only problem I see with that is not every private school is going to be charging the same amount, and so then you run into the problem of, okay, well, does the voucher just promise to cover every dollar of the private school tuition? And if that's the case, do we end up with and somebody made the point, are we ending up already with the same problem that we have with colleges, where they're just like, hey, this is subsidized, why don't we just charge whatever we feel like? I mean, the price of college is,
Okay, so that's a follow-up question.
Insane.
Will the private school voucher program drive up the cost of private schools because now people have $10,000 plus dollar checks at their disposal to allocate against the cost of private school? That's a damn good point. Dude, you're on fire today. You're on fire today. Will the private school voucher program make private schools more expensive because now folks that are middle of the road income-wise have five-figure checks at their disposal to allocate to private schools? That's a damn good question.
Yeah. I mean,
great question.
Basically more free money from the government.
That's all it is.
And
this is stimulus money all over again. Is this going to create... Follow-up question for you. Follow-up question for you. Let's say the voucher program goes away. What happens to the family that utilized the voucher program to take little Johnny and little Susie out of elementary school in a public school and put little Johnny and little Susie in a private school? Then the voucher program goes away because the political capital isn't there anymore. You go from a Republican Virginia, a Republican governor, to a Democratic governor. Youngkin likes the voucher program. I would imagine a lot of Democrats do not. The voucher program goes away. Little Johnny and little Sally's family took little Johnny and little Sally, put them in the private school from the public school because they used the five-figure check. A couple years from now, the five-figure check is not a reality. They can no longer afford to send little Johnny and little Susie and little Sally to the private school anymore. Does little Johnny, little Susie, little Sally then get yanked out and put back in the public school? And what does that do for little Johnny and little Susie's development?
I won't pretend to know what it does for the development. I know the parents... if they couldn't afford it when they were getting the voucher, they may not be able to afford it when they stop getting the voucher. So I think at that point they start shopping around for. Obviously they look at their own district to figure out where their kids are gonna drop into the public school,
placement
map.
The follow-up question,
and then maybe they start looking at some options like Paul McCarter is talking about. Maybe they start talking to their neighbors and saying, "Hey, we saw this great idea. Why do I want to send my kids to a public school? Can we find a teacher who's not getting paid enough and say, hey, we'd like you to teach our kids. We've got 12 kids in the neighborhood."
We will admit that route that Paul's outlining, while on paper it's a very, very good idea, does require much more effort from the parent than just sending the kid to the school.
Yeah.
It requires much more involvement with the parent. You're finding the teacher.
That's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, but not all parents have the time.
True.
The parents that do have the time probably are coming from income families, families of wealth. Maybe it's a stay-at-home parent, like we highlighted in weeks ago. If you're coming from a family where it's only one working parent, that's few and far between these days. As what it was, as you highlighted, in the 50s and 60s, where one parent could keep an entire household afloat much easier.
Mm-hmm.
How about this question? Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, viewers and listeners of this fine and fair and talk show. If the voucher program, will the voucher program create new private schools that have tuition literally the number of the voucher?
Right.
That's a damn good question. My initial response was no. And why my response was no? Because it's extremely difficult to launch a private school.
Yeah. I mean,
building, space, overhead, teachers. I mean, good Lord, how much money would you need to launch a private school from scratch?
Yeah, and then to
$10 million plus dollars. I mean, I have no idea.
And then to put your hand out to the government, hoping for those
cookie crumbs,
hoping for those voucher checks to come rolling in. And how long are you going to have to stay in business?
What's the return on investment? And what happens if the voucher program doesn't stay long term?
Yeah.
That's why I don't see the voucher programming birthing new private schools that are trying to capitalize on these vouchers. Because the ROI is just too long. And there's just too much political uncertainty over this voucher program.
Yeah.
I do think, though, the voucher program will drive enrollment to the private schools.
Yeah.
I do think, though, the connotations and the denotations associated with public schools right now are more... How would you characterize them? I'm choosing words carefully here. How do you characterize the denotations and the connotations associated with public schools in 2022 right now? Viewers and listeners, how would you characterize them?
I'm not exactly sure what you're asking. Basically,
what's the brand? What's the stigma? What's the brand equity?
I mean, it depends who you ask. I've got friends in Waynesboro, and one of them teaches in schools, and I haven't been over their house much since the pandemic, but I remember her complaining about like SOLs, like the standards that are needed have no basis in reality and don't match anything that they're actually doing in the school.
Teaching the test.
Basically, yeah, we're teaching the test. And I find that, I think probably most teachers find it abominable.
Yeah. Nauseating.
Yeah.
But they're forced to do it. Because they're graded on SOLs.
And I would say that
chicken and egg.
I would say that that's a big problem for a lot of people. One of the connotations of, sending a student, I don't know how much that's that kind of testing lands in private schools. But
there's no SOLs in private schools.
I would hope not.
The closest to an SOL in private school is maybe the AP exams.
Okay.
ACT, SAT.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it, but I know that she thought SOLs were just
a lot of people think SOLs are bogus.
A horrendous system.
Bogus. I'm in that camp. Lisa Costello has this comment. It's a good one. Ready for this? Lisa, we like when you watch the show, Lisa. She says, my son is autistic, and he was running away from public schools almost daily after being bullied constantly. I was getting calls daily to show up to get him or ride around the neighborhood because he was missing after running off from school.
Man.
I fought all the way to the Richmond Department of Education to get him transferred to the Virginia Institute of Autism, to no avail.
Man.
I was told he could go to the Virginia Institute of Autism if I paid his tuition. If the school sent him, they would have to pay it plus lose the money they were receiving for him. I'm a single mom and I could not afford it at the time. It is all about what is good for the entirety of the public schools, not good for the individual student. If she sent if she sent her son to the Virginia Institute of Autism, she had to pay the tuition.
Because the school didn't want to.
If the public school sent her son to the Virginia Institute of Autism, the public school would have to pay the tuition, and then they would lose the money from the Commonwealth from an enrollment standpoint.
Yeah.
The school chose to keep her son in the public school and not send him to the Virginia Institute of Autism, despite the Virginia Institute of Autism being the best path for him.
Yeah.
What do you got to say about that?
I mean, that's the problem. That's the big problem, is that it's not necessarily what's best for the individual student. It's how do we make this blank show, keep running day after day. And that's an administrator's task, not a teacher's task.
Let's go to Danny. Danny's got a comment here. Danny O'Day. We're talking about education like a commodity and not a public good. The benefits to society that accompany a broadly educated populace, one that cultivates a sense of shared community and flattens the lines between class hierarchies, serves immense and incalculable benefits to a given society. Viewing it exclusively through the lens of commodification reduces the value of service and good that it more broadly serves.
I would tend to agree.
I think that's a fair point.
But
unrealistic point. Is that what you're going to say?
I wouldn't call it unrealistic, but you've got to balance all these things. You've got to balance the fact that
is education a commodity?
Well, you have to balance the fact that education is a right for all students, and how do you make that happen? We've got private schools, but what if there's not a private school in this district? Then you need a public school. So you've got this, you've got all these requirements, and one of those is that there are public schools at this point, because we haven't come up with a better system. And then you run into the issue of commoditization, because how do you make them run? How do you keep them lean? And all the other issues that we've been talking about.
Is the problem? Are public schools so far behind private schools right now because public schools have always seen themselves as a public utility as opposed to a commodity that has to fight for market share? The public schools have gotten fat and happy and have rested on their laurels because students are going to show up no matter what, and tax dollars are going to be there no matter what.
I'd hardly call them fat and happy.
Okay, maybe happy is not the right word. The public schools have become bloated in overhead.
That's more fair, I think.
Bloated in overhead because the students are going to come up and the money's going to be there no matter what. The private schools, on the other hand, have had to compete against each other. And the private schools realize that they're a commodity because they're charging anywhere from $15,000 to $35,000 a year for the kid to go there. And if the kid does not get return on investment, the parents don't see ROI on that $15,000 to $35,000, the parents will pull their kid and they will try a different commodity out.
Yeah.
So the private schools have had to innovate. They've had to get better. They've had to improve their technology. Look at the I Love CVille Network. This network over the course of 5 or 6 years, what have we done? Do you remember when we first started this network? We were using an iPhone on a crappy tripod on the tiniest desk possible in an echo chamber on the second floor of this building. We've added microphones, we've added cameras, we've added computers. We went from Comcast to Ting, crappy internet to fiber. We added a new table, new chairs, lights, light bulbs, branding banners, a soundboard, 3 Apple TVs, big screens, branding, built a studio and took it from an office on the second floor of a building and created a studio at a storefront level at a highly trafficked area. Right?
Yeah.
And why did we have to do it?
I don't know that we had to.
Because we're a commodity. And advertising dollars can go elsewhere.
Yeah.
They can go anywhere they want. But because we've innovated and we've kept this network at the cusp of innovation locally, the business has grown double-digit every year in revenue. 15 years, double-digit in revenue every year for 15 straight years. That is what the private schools have done. And now you look at the private schools in the area, their technology's improved, they put turf fields in there, they've added a middle school lacrosse program, they're introducing pickleball programs, they've improved their science, technology, engineering, and math programs, they got squash programs, they got transportation, they got people to look after the kids so they're not walking on streets like High Street with no sidewalks and cars going 35 miles an hour by them. Has anyone heard of a kid going to Covenant School or St. Anne's Belfield and having to play Frogger on High Street? Has anyone heard of a kid that's gone to any private school in this area, Tandem Friends, Charlottesville Catholic School, the Renaissance School, and has anyone heard the trials of little Johnny walking from his house down a precarious street and playing Frogger and having to risk his or her life to get to school because they have to walk to the private school? Not a single person. That narrative does not exist locally. It does in public schools.
There may be good reasons for that.
What? The parents driving the kid to school. That's the reason?
Okay, well, when I went to private school in Los Angeles, nobody lived close to that school, and the way we solved it was carpools. Not that I don't know how this was with everybody at the school, but I know that for myself and my sisters, my parents made friends with other families sending their kids to the school, and somebody would drive us to school in the morning and somebody would drive us home. We liked one mom because she'd always stop at 7-Eleven and give us some money to buy slushies and candy. But the point was that I don't even know if there was a bus system going there, but it's not like my parents were driving to school and picking us up every day. We made do.
All right, what's your response to this? He said, Danny O'Day says, and Carol Thorpe has a great comment. Carol Thorpe says this: I feel for Lisa Costello. She says, in the case of my Matthew, when Albemarle County Public Schools were required by federal law to provide him 4 years of post-high school education, they could not meet his needs with its very limited program here in Albemarle. It had to initiate a reassignment for Matthew, not me, and so it paid for a very pricey 4-year residential school in Chesterfield as its choice to meet the needs of our son. If I told you what it cost Albemarle County Public Schools over that time, your jaw would absolutely drop. Carol Thorpe, you make the program better. Carol, I tagged you and Lisa Costello on the thread in my Facebook page. Carol and Lisa are fantastic viewers of this show. Danny O'Day is another fantastic viewer of the show. He's challenging us here, and we respect his challenge. He says, every single point you and Judah are making about private schools is just further evidence that the private schools are enclaves for wealthier families. You want to respond to that? Danny, doesn't the voucher program allow a chance for a non-wealthy family to get into a private school? It's subsidizing the cost of tuition. I understand the family is still going to have to make up the difference. But that difference is a lot less.
What's the alternative? The alternative is that there is no chance for them to go to a private school, or are the detractors of private schools saying that they should be abolished because they're a fabrication of white supremacy?
Ooh, I don't understand what that means. Give us some more clarity on what you're talking about there.
I mean, it goes back to Matt's comments on Instagram about private schools being... Private schools are just racial segregation. I mean, maybe white supremacy is the wrong word. Racial segregation.
I
don't know that I see it either, but for the people that are arguing that, is the answer to abolish private schools? If you really believe that private schools are all about racial segregation, then I would say that there's a pretty strong argument that we should get rid of them.
We should also debunk this stigma. There is a stigma associated with wealth. Wealth is not synonymous with white. Let's debunk that. Wealth knows no color. Wealth knows hard work, risk-taking, chance-taking, common sense, and grinding. That's what wealth knows. Wealth knows no color. So let's debunk the stigma that wealth means white, please. That's not fair. I got this question for you. And this is a great question. How will parents and kids that are paying full tuition at private schools respond to the parents and kids that come to the private schools via the public school voucher program?
I think it depends on the family. Some people are going to be outraged. Other people are going to say, "Hey, this is great."
Because a lot of people, and I apologize for interrupting. A lot of people are absolutely outraged about student loan forgiveness.
Yeah.
And why they're outraged about student loan forgiveness, for the most part, the foundation of their outrage is, hey, damn it, I paid my student loans and I had to go through this grind of years of paying them back. So should the next generation.
Yeah, it's an understandable viewpoint.
Understandable viewpoint.
It's like I spent most of my life paying off my college debt, and now somebody is just getting it. I mean, like, where do I get reimbursed?
I worked my way through the University of Virginia as a host, busboy, server, and bartender at Ruby Tuesdays at Barracks Road.
I worked at a Mexican restaurant, and then I washed windows for 5 years.
There you go. Okay? I got this point made by one of my buddies. I didn't go to college. I got into the contracting business, and I needed a new truck to become a contractor to carry the tools around. And my truck payment was my college debt.
Right.
And so I had to make the truck payment.
Does he get paid back for the truck?
Am I going to get money for my truck?
For the tools?
Yeah.
For the time in a trade school possibly?
So that same mindset where people are saying, hey, this is not fair, college loan forgiveness program, does that same mindset creep into private schools with them saying, hey, this is not fair, we're paying full freight, but this voucher program is letting folks in?
It definitely will.
It definitely will.
Some people will be outraged. Other people will just be, like, hey, this isn't fair. And other people will be like, hey, look, I get it. I am privileged, and this is an opportunity for other people to get, what we assume is a better education, and more power to them.
Vanessa Parkhill says to Danny O'Day, Vanessa Parkhill, the Queen of Arleysville, St. Anne's Belfield offers scholarships. Yeah. I'm sure other local schools do as well.
No doubt.
Not every kid there comes from a wealthy family, Danny.
Yeah, that's true as well.
It is such a dynamic topic, dude. It is such a dynamic topic. And it resonates with all of us because a lot of us have kids. You know what I'm saying? We have kids and we care about them. Anything you want to offer?
I mean...
Danny says, it seems kind of selfish for you guys to say, I suffered from my education, therefore everyone ought to as well.
Well, we're not specifically saying that about ourselves. We're saying that is the argument that you often hear.
That is the argument.
And it's a valid argument.
It is a valid argument.
And that doesn't mean that there's not another side to it, or that people can't come to accept that times are changing and you just got the shaft. And the next generation won't. But it's something to take into account.
Exactly. I hope you guys enjoyed today's talk show. We work hard for you, and we ask that you pass along to your friends and family the gospel. The I Love CVille Show, Monday through Friday, 12:30 to 1:30. Today it's 1:40. I just looked at the clock for the first time. Thought you did a tremendous job today.
Thank you.
A tremendous job today, Judah Whitcower. I mean, 100% on point, Judah Whitcower today. When you see him, say thank you for killing it on the show, Judah Whitcower, because you killed it. We will have frank conversation on this show. In today's conversation, there's aspects of the show that probably made people uncomfortable. We talk real stuff here. Real stuff. All right. That's the Wednesday edition of the talk show. The show's archived on ilovecville.com. My name is Jerry Miller. I want you to mark the calendar for Thursday, September 1. The Clifton is launching a music series in Keswick, and they're kicking it off with Coda and Marie of Chamomile and Whiskey.
It is going to
be dynamite.
We've had them here in the studio, and they are incredible.
They are incredible. It is going to be a dynamite Thursday music series, a much-needed one for the eastern side of Albemarle County, the Keswick area, where there is not a lot of options. We'll see if we can get Coda and Marie on this talk show. For Judah, I'm Jerry. This, the I Love CVille Show, on a Wednesday. So long, everybody.